Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to the first ever live taping of Nothing But Terps podcast with a live audience. Today, we got a special guest. For everybody, give a round of applause for Slinger. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you.
I
Thanks
really
for having
appreciate
me.
it. Nice meeting you in person, finally.
Appreciate it.
Been talking to you for a minute. Nice to finally meet you. Before we start the podcast, what I'd like to do, take a dab first. If you guys want to take a dab with us, you're more than welcome. Load your torches up. Your dab rigs, get your torches out. So I'm gonna let you take a dab off Rocco Piece I Brung in town today.
Sounds good, man.
Hell yeah. See what kind of terps. So first we're gonna start with some papaya from my homie Homesteady Hetty from Hawaii. Take a
This
dab
is
of
my
that.
kind of podcast,
That's what
bro.
I'm doing. We
It
gonna
has
get
to
high.
start. I mean, this is great. It has to start with a dab. I like how it's like, well, before you say anything.
Yeah, we'll talk later. Take a dab first.
You know,
Yeah,
if
everybody,
old
that's what
me,
let me hit them
old
torches.
me could talk to young me and be like, yo, this is your future. Wow.
Pretty loud terps, huh?
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah,
I'm
he's
ready.
from the Big Island. So bro,
Should I just use this dab right
hell
here?
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, pick your poison, bro. Get a bigger dab than that.
I'm just gonna start like medium.
Oh,
you know
okay.
what I mean?
Gotcha.
Well, I'm going for like it's not a sprint. It's a
You know what? Yeah,
marathon. We'll pick up the
we got some
size here. We'll pick up the size as we. Let me get to know your rig a little bit here.
Gotcha. Now in the end, I said I was gonna do a ninja dab, by the way.
I mean,
Like a big
whatever you want to
fucking
do.
ninja dab.
It's you're the host, so that's how it goes.
Yeah, you don't have to do that, of course. All right, go ahead, bro.
All right, cool. All right, let's get in there. You got the, can you turn that dab right on for me if you don't mind?
Gotcha.
Making sure that's at the right height and everything like that. So when I put it down, let's see.
Got it.
What are you going on, about 550 probably or something?
550.
Yeah, that's about standard, right?
It's gonna be the same temp. Today also I'm be using a Dr. Dab over here.
So we got a new quartz banger by Breezy Glass. Is that what?
Yeah,
this is
Breezy
there?
actually brought it up today for you to try that out.
Hell yeah.
Pretty sick.
I don't know. We might need some more butane
Shout out to
in
Breezy.
this torch.
Anybody in the audience got some butane?
Because it feels a little light right to start. I like to be able to like really
Butane,
blast
anybody?
it. Okay, you want to
Let's get it.
Thank you.
Got hot.
My blazer at home makes such a difference if it's full or not full. You know what I mean? Like,
all right, so while we're waiting on that, Shahida, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Where you from?
well, I would say technically I'm a New Yorker. I was born and raised on Long Island, right outside Manhattan. Grew up there. Ended up going to school in upstate New York, first for a year and a half in Albany, New York, and then ended up going to film school at Ithaca College.
All right, and then what got you into actual glass blowing?
Let's see, what actually got me into the glass blowing? Well, really just first discovering glass pipes in general. Around 93, 94, I first discovered glass. A friend of mine that went on Dead Tour actually brought like a fumed silver chillum over to my house, and I actually had never even seen a chillum before, so I actually thought the fact that it was a chillum, the way you held it, I just thought it was super dope, kind of tribal and exotic and different, and it was fumed silver and it changed color, and he would like clean the bowl out between each pack, and it just was like the super heady way to smoke. So I remember my mom actually moved to San Francisco, and I took a road trip. I actually bought a VW bus, took a road trip out to San Francisco, and I knew that on Haight Street they sold glass. This is in like 95. So that was one of the first glass pipes I ever bought. I went to Haight Street to buy it. Like there was no head shop in New York, there was no head shop I knew that sold glass pipes. So yeah, that's kind of how it began. And then basically, dude I was buying weed from, I was going to school in Ithaca, and I had there was a local cat that would like sell me quarter pounds or half pounds of weed that I would break down and sell to college kids. And he actually started blowing glass because one of his friends had moved to the West Coast, and then that dude's mom had basically dated a glass blower and like started making glass beads. And so my friend, this dude Zach, had started fucking with his mom's torch, trying to figure out how to make pipes. Met a couple of people on the West Coast, figured out how to make like a spoon pipe, came back to the East Coast, taught my buddy how to like basically set up a torch. He barely even taught him anything. And then my friend was like flying blind with like some glass rods and tubes trying to like make pipes. And that's the first exposure I got to it. And actually was like selling his glass to like other college kids and stuff like that. And he actually got one of his best friends on the torch to start blowing glass, and he bought a torch. And I one day was over at his house, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to try it?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so I got in this torch and made like the jankiest spoon ever, you know what I mean, with barely any direction. But like, you know, at that point, I had like got my beak wet and was like super interested. And then another friend amongst those group of friends moved out west, hung out with that same dude Zach, snowboarded for a season, and when he came back, he knew how to make a spoon pipe. And he needed a place to blow glass.
All right, cheers, guys.
So this is like 1997. And my homie Pat Kiefer came back from snowboarding in Bellingham for a season, learned to make a spoon pipe. He was back in Ithaca and he like needed a place to blow glass. And me and my homie Derek were renting a 5-bedroom house, growing weed in one of the bedrooms. Kind of invited him over and we're like, hey, we got this extra side room in our kitchen. Like, if you want to like set up here, if you're down to like teach us, you can set up and work here. He ended up moving into his house and we were like, hey, we're actually growing weed. Like, we'll like give you part of our crop, like as part of the deal or whatever. So we kind of I started an apprenticeship with this dude. I actually watched him make his like first inside out stuff. Like when I started apprenticing with him, he knew how to do like the super basic outside pattern fume spoons or whatever. He hated like jam bands and that kind of stuff, but I was like super into going to fish shows. So we would go to fish shows together to like sell glass. Basically, it's like how I got started. And I started blowing glass in like the spring, like April of '97. I think I'd made my first spoon, and like that August of '97, I quit my job and went full time basically. So it only took me about 6 months before I felt like I was able to like make a little sellable pipe or whatever.
And was then like your first introduction to like the art scene in general, or did you draw
I
before
mean,
then, or did any
I
kind of
wasn't
artwork?
super into drawing. I was going to school for like film photography and visual arts. I was getting like a BFA. Ended up switching to just a Bachelor of Science in cinema production. But I took tons of art classes for sure. I basically, in the back of my head, always wanted to be, I never wanted to like, I was basically like a hippie, like kind of a young wook. I never wanted to like, in my mind, I never wanted to get a real job. I wanted to figure out how I could like work with my hands and make a living. I always had this feeling, I love cannabis, I love weed. I always thought that somehow I'd be involved in the cannabis space, but I never necessarily thought I was going to be like a grower or like a trapper or that kind of thing. Although I dabbled in those things for sure. I tried it out. And for sure realized that wasn't really my route, through having some crazy experiences. But, yeah, so, when glass pipes sort of like popped up, it was like, you know, at first it was like innocent, like, you know, other people, like I've interviewed people about their path with glass, and some people were like, oh, when I first started blowing glass, I knew this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I didn't necessarily look at it like that. I looked at it like someone might look at like skateboarding or something like that. You just pick up this hobby and you're doing it with your friends. And sure, there was a business part involved, you know what I mean? Of like selling the pieces and stuff like that or whatever. But it came pretty natural to me. Again, I was going to fish shows and stuff like that. And so like going to the lot and selling glass I was like selling t-shirts and food and sodas in the lot before I sold glass. So I was already going to the lot. I was already going to the lot hustling, you know? And it actually was, I went to a fish show, a huge fish show on a Air Force base that had like 70,000 people at the end of August, like a 2-day festival style show. And I brought like a huge amount of my early glass with me and sold it all at that show. And that's where I came back from that show and quit my job. I was like, okay, I got this. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, I heard before you came up with your name. Now were you originally going by your first name, your actual name?
I mean, you know, I wasn't going by anything. Like back then, you know, just to clarify, there was no internet. There was no like fame per se. There was no need to have a name. You know what I mean? My name came about really when I started using the internet, to be honest with you. Back in 98, 99, I made a handful of pieces that I signed AG in like an implosion marble. My full name was Aaron Goldberg. So, you know, but I actually knew a bunch of other glassblowers whose initials were AG. So it kind of didn't really stick out or whatever. Back when I first started, one of my huge influences, and the guy that I'm talking about that I first saw blow glass, his name was Ezra. And he was in '97 to me the best glass blower in the nation, as far as I knew. Glass I knew, and a lot of other people. He was kind of like a leader in style and stuff. And he would sign all his pieces with a little EZ Millie, and so that you know, he was one of the first people I knew who was really like putting a name out there and like signing his work and like claiming ownership over it. It's when I first started using the internet that I became Marble Slinger, and it was actually like on a weed forum called overgrow.com that doesn't exist anymore. I can tell that story if you want or whatever. I can just keep ranting. But yeah, so back in the day, when I was living in Seattle, I met this dude named Bubble Man, who wasn't even Bubble Man yet, and he was living up in Vancouver. Met him at some fish shows, and he started buying glass off me. And he was like, basically, I got my first email account ever when I lived in Seattle because I wanted to talk to my homie in Canada. Like, you know, long distance. This is really even before most people had cell phones. Like back then, you were like,
Weren't even unlimited.
yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So like, I remember at this time in my life, I didn't even have a phone in my house. I used to use a payphone across the street from my house, just to put it all in perspective. This is like 99 Seattle. And anyway, my neighbors actually worked at a cyber cafe. So I had access to go to use the internet basically there. And my homie up in Canada was buying my glass and putting it on the internet and selling it, which is like my first experience with that kind of thing. And he was like, yo, you should check out this forum, overgrow.com. I'm selling your glass there. And he's like, get an email account so we can chat so you don't have to like whatever. So I got a Hotmail account and signed up on overgrow.com, which was a super huge international cannabis site with growers from all over the world. And, you know, this is back in the late 90s or whatever, where like weed is totally illegal. And, you know, when you went to a head shop, you had to say, you know, you can't say the word bong. It was for tobacco use only. And, you know, my experience with breaking the law is you're not really supposed to like telegraph what you're not supposed to put it out there for anyone. You're not supposed to put your own evidence out there for to get busted. So I had a lot of like, I wasn't sure what to do here, like how to like act and stuff. But anyway, I joined this forum and I was making some marbles and stuff like that, though pipes was my full focus, but I chose the name Marble Slinger because I thought it kind of made it sound like I wasn't like a big pipe factory. It made it sound like I had another gig, like that I was just some artsy dude who made a couple, you know what I mean? This was a rationalization. And there was a DJ, I was really in drum and bass at the time. I went to a lot of fish shows, but also really going to a lot of big raves, actually. And back in that time period of my life, I was a young person that wasn't thinking much about the future, and my goal was mostly to go on fish tour or go to a rave. Like, I was just trying to enjoy myself, you know what I mean? And like, so there was a DJ in New York, DJ Soul Slinger, that I thought was dope. Actually, this company right here, Liquid Sky, is like him and his partner started this company back in the day. Very inspired by them. So anyway, I innocently just kind of like stole his name in a sense, but like, you know, took out the soul and put the marble in there. And funny enough, actually, fast forward to now, him and I chat on the internet. And we haven't met in person yet, but like he likes that I'm a slinger, and like I told him I'm very inspired by him and stuff like that, and we chat all the time, and that's pretty cool to like how the internet works or whatever.
So when did you realize that you were like onto something as far as when you built your cult following? How did you go about that?
I don't remember ever having a cult following for a long time, man. Like, you know, I blew glass for at least 10 years, I think, before I even started doing like the sandblast styles that I'm known for now. And I think at that moment is when I started to get probably more notice from a larger group of people, but also it's when we started using the internet. So like 2000, I mean, I was one of the earlier glass blowers to use the internet, to be honest with you. I was encouraging lots. Once I started using Overgrow, things started to so I started using Overgrow, and actually when I started using Overgrow, like I would post a picture of a pipe, and like I was selling pieces to people in like Italy, Australia, Romania. Like I actually sold glass more internationally then than I do now in some ways. It was really weird. That site was super poppin', and I was kind of blowing up on there a little bit. And glass was a very small part of that site, but the same people who the people who were really big glass aficionados on this site started a new site called Toke City, which I'm pretty sure still exists today. But that site came at the right time, and it had the same layout as overgrow.com. It had all these indoor growing, outdoor growing, all these like different growing sub forums, and it had a glass forum. And on overgrow.com, the glass forum was the least popular of the whole thing. Everyone was there more for the weed. But when Toke City came around, the people who started that forum were really into glass. So the glass forum on that kind of blew up, and it became bigger than the cannabis forums. And then they even started like a secret back forum, like it was illegal. You know, this is again like still glass was like, you know, Operation Pipe Dreams happened in 2003. Yeah. So, you know, again, it was like choosing fake names. You're basically, I'm worried about, in a long story long, I'm worried about getting in trouble for like manufacturing and distributing drug paraphernalia. So you're kind of doing everything you can to distance your government name and any other details from the man. And, back then, like, we were so like, the kind of people who blew glass were outlaws, like you have a lot more people now who are like art school kids. When I started, I was probably the most art school kid I knew in the scene. Like, I was working with people who like made meth pipes and like, were just like more like drug dealers and gangsters and stuff like that. And, it was like a different type of scene, you know what I mean? Of the people who got into glass back then or whatever. It was a very hustler mentality, basically. A lot of the people I knew back in the early 2000s, late 90s who got into glass were like people who were deep in the cannabis space and felt that glass blowing was a little more legitimate, which is funny because it wasn't really legitimate at all, really.
So you just started. So what got you into doing more of like you strictly just were doing pipes at this time?
Yeah, I mean, I've been making pipes for a living since I was 22 years old, which is 97, and I'm 50 now. You know what I mean? So that's like 28 years. And in terms of like cult followings or like me getting an audience and that kind of thing, I think that comes hand in hand with a bunch of factors. The first one being the internet. That's why I kept counting the internet stories, basically, is the internet. Again, when I first started, I didn't have the internet to like broadcast myself, right? So the first guy to really kind of blow pipes up on the internet in the 90s was this guy, Alex Griffin, who did Fish Tour religiously. And he had a website called Headies.com. And he was selling Ezra, Jason Lee, Marcel, and a lot of the top Clinton and the top pipe makers at the time. And it was crazy because I was doing Fish Tour too, and I was good friends with dude, and I would see him pull in the lot, and people would run after his car and gather around him to see what glass he had gotten shipped in, and like, because glass was like hard, it was super like, you couldn't just get it. Like you couldn't just DM someone. You couldn't go to a store. Like you had to actually find it. And then there was just like this small population of people making these pieces that were actually a little bit cooler than the other people, right? And so that was, to me, I watched this birth of headies, and it kind of goes a lot. I really compare glass a lot to other subcultures. So like an easy comparison is skateboarding, you know what I mean? And you're just like, this first group of guys is skating a certain way, and then the next group comes away and they're just like doing 720s and they're just blowing the next guys away, right? You know what I mean? And so um I was witnessing the next generation that was like taking what Snodgrass and those guys started to do and just kind of like tricking out a lot more, finding a market, you know what I mean? Like I remember when I first moved to Seattle, like 98 or something, Ezra had moved to Bellingham and he came down with his hammer bubbler and it was super sick. It was all teched out. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to get like 250 for this. And we were like, oh, cool. Wow. Like at that time, a $420 piece was like the most expensive piece anyone sold, right? That was a baller piece. You put everything into like the craziest piece you could make. For 420 bucks, right? So a $250 bubbler was still pretty sick. And I remember he like sold it to like a distributor guy for like 250. That guy sold it to a shop for like 450. And the shop sold it to a customer for 900 bucks. And word got back to my boy that the bubbler he sold for 250 went for 900. And he was like, prices are going up, boys. You know what I mean? Like, and this became this whole like beginning of like this sort of heady glass, like we're going to put like work into it. We're going to like, kind of like take a more mindful route with the glass. Like Bob Snodgrass, and you look at like that dude AK style. And to me, his style is like quintessential of the early glass style where it's like, and I don't mean this as a disrespectful thing, but it's like hippie throw up into a piece, and it's like all these every color, all these millis, all this pattern, everything you can do in a piece. Like that was the original heady, right? But then like the next generation came around, like guys like Ease, for instance, where they're like, I'm going to choose two colors and I'm just going to wig-wag those two colors and stick them color to color and make this like, I'm going to like put a little restraint in there. You know what I mean? I'm going to like tone down and find the style. You know what I mean? And like, and really what happened too is the industry grew as well. You know what I mean? Like again, in the 90s, we had like a handful of colors. We had like one or two torches. We didn't have a lot of the same things that people have today. Same with skateboarding, same with graffiti. You know, I mean, the kind of spray paint people use today is ridiculous compared to like people in the 70s were like getting little nozzles off their mom's different cleaning products under their sink to put on the cans to get different tips, right? And they were making the tips, right? Now you go to a graffiti store and you buy whatever paint made for graffiti and tips, and you can watch a video and all this shit. Same with glass, you know what I mean? Like it's next generation, and it's dope. I love it. It's great. Like, so yeah, I don't know, next question.
For the next question, let's take another dab.
Let's take a dab. I need to like recharge and I can keep ranting whatever you want to hear about.
That's some skunk killer right there.
All right.
or gas strand. Something different. That's sweat another dad. Fucking come on.
So that year, you had any Negro Air Force you got serious about it, you were looking up to it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was actually kind of my squad for the most part. Again, I didn't have there was no way to really, the only time I saw other glass when I went out to festivals or the lot or whatever. And I mean, I remember Fish Tour in the 90s. I don't remember seeing that much crazy glass out there. I felt like it was my squad that was dominating back then. And so, you know, I was like, I was the next generation underneath like Jason Lee, Marcel, Ezra, Clinton, Pedro, like the Chris Dawson, this whole list of guys that a lot of them don't even blow glass anymore. But so yeah, like the guys that I looked up to, I was basically like working with and stuff. I was definitely trying to make glass that was way beyond my skill level at the time. You know, they had years on me basically, and I was trying to do this. I was working right next to Jason, trying to do whatever Jason was doing. When I was first selling glass to Headies.com, he thought it was like Jason's like B grade glass or whatever, like his like seconds or something like that. Cause you know, I was like trying to do what Jason's doing, but it's not as good. It's not as clean.
They not realizing it's you the whole time doing it.
No, I mean, he did eventually realize it was me or whatever.
Awesome. So how did you go about starting to produce like the artwork that people love so much?
Like the assault and all that kind of stuff.
Correct.
That started because around the year 2003, 2004, I was living in Vancouver, BC, and there was this graffiti artist named The Dark, and he was a stencil graffiti artist, and he did the sickest stencils around the city, and it was just getting my attention. I thought it was dope as fuck, and I started getting influenced by it and started like basically designing and cutting and painting little toy stencils and painting them around the city. And I was on the internet and I found this like stencil graffiti forum. It was actually based out of Australia and had all these like stencil graffiti artists. And through that, I discovered Banksy. And so stencil graffiti kind of really enamored me because, to be honest with you, I never was that great at drawing like faces and people and stuff like that. But I always wanted to incorporate that. And so I basically got into.
Cheers, everyone.
Now, I'm going to take a really big one next. That was too small, I think.
Oh, bro, you ready?
You're right. You're right. You're right.
Reheat. That's some more.
All right. I will. But so yeah, you know, funny enough, it's in like 2004, 2005. I'd be working on these headpieces that would take me all week, right? I'd be working on this big butler with all these attachments and whatever. And so it's a lot of like, back then we didn't use Bunsen burners as much. I didn't even have a hand torch, to be honest with you. So it was a lot of like taking the piece out, doing a move, putting the piece back in the kiln to let it reheat. And so I would cut stencils in my spare time, and I'd ride my BMX bike around Vancouver and paint stencils on, you know, graffiti style on garbage cans and walls and whatever. And I was having a lot of fun just being a toy stencil graffiti dude, right? I was having more fun, honestly, than the glass at the time. I was about 10 years into blowing glass, and it was becoming just, you know, rinse and repeat. And it became more of a hustle than I was like super excited about it. So I was like, how can I take this vibe, this stencil vibe, and incorporate it into my glass so I can like, because I make my living off my glass. If I could have, it's probably really hot. Careful. Yeah, you got it. If I could have as much fun doing my glass as I'm having doing these stencils. And then I knew this dude, Robert Mickelson, did this Grawl technique and he taught a class. So I basically paid some money to fly to Florida, take his class, to learn how to do this image technique. And that changed everything for me. At that point, I could like, I don't think technically anyone had really done imagery like that on glass before. And all of a sudden I like kind of realized that I had this blank canvas. And so now it was like, I have a blank canvas. What am I going to do with it? What am I going to put on there? You know what I mean? And like, I went to college, I went to art school, and in school, the teachers would push you to really be cerebral about your work, to think about it, not just to jump in, but think about why you're making your decisions, right? So I would think about the pipe, and I wanted to be like very conscious in my artwork choices. I didn't want to just like try to put an image on there that would just sell the piece. You know what I mean? I wanted to express myself. I wanted to use the fact that there was the context of a pipe. Like, you know what I mean? So, early ideas were stuff like, honestly, you know, it kind of sounds corny, but like, you know, doing the Campbell soup can by Andy Warhol or whatever. First of all, I actually didn't totally understand Andy Warhol's work, and I kind of went down a rabbit hole of trying to understand his work and why it was so important and stuff like that. And I kind of came full circle with him where I was like, wow, this dude really was onto something, because what I realized is he was making a huge statement about commercial art, basically. Like a soup can, a painting of a soup can, the statement it's basically making is like that, oh, this is a commercial product for sale, just like a can of soup in a supermarket, right? So where's the line between artistic expression and a product for sale? And that's why I felt with pipes, you know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to express myself, but
Here, bro. Here, buddy.
I'm trying to express myself, but I'm also making a product for sale, right? So there's a sort of not conflict of interest. It's not like I'm just straight like throwing paint at canvas and just bearing my soul to the world. I'm trying to, like, you know, you have to be able to smoke weed out of it. There's like, you know, so there's like this, you know, this meeting point or whatever. So I started to really relate to that. And I thought, you know, oh, it makes sense. Put like a soup can on there. Also, we were having a lot of debates back then, especially about like whether glass and glass pipes can be fine art. So they find that fact that Warhol's work was considered fine art and a soup can, and I thought it was an interesting adding to the conversation of art to try to, like, you know, take what he was doing and put it on a piece, and you know what I mean, like. And so anyway, yeah, you know, basically was trying to come up with like witty, interesting images that would be on a pipe, and why would you put that there or whatever. You know, when you create something, it ends up having a life of its own. Like, you know, it goes out into the world and people interact with that. And exactly. So, you know, and art is supposed to some degree be some kind of conversation. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it just kind of snowballed for there. And I'm someone that's always believed that if you have a good idea, you should take it as far as you can. So as that idea fell into like kind of snowball, I just kind of kept going with it. And then it kind of kept going crazy until Morton Salt got upset about it.
So, like, what happened with that exactly? You know,
I mean, to be honest with you, just sort of out of the blue, I literally got an email from an attorney, and they said, hey, like, we've kind of noticed what you're doing, and we want you to stop. And yeah, it was actually, I was like, kind of, I couldn't believe it when I got it, actually. I was a little surprised at the same time. It's not that I didn't take it seriously, I did, but like, yeah, you realize it's getting out there or whatever. And at first, it was definitely, it was like, it made me feel lots of different emotions, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, it was kind of great. I'll be honest with you, I was surprised it went as far as it did. Like when we started doing even more remixes with and stuff like that, it was straight up, it was the audience that drove me. In other words, I kept thinking at some point, people were going to be like, yo, when are you going to stop that? Like, that we're bored of it. But I would come out with a new one and I would get this feedback where people would be like, that's the best one you've ever done. And I'd be like, no way. Then it became this game of like, well, can we outdo ourselves? Like, it almost went from like, maybe this isn't very creative because I keep doing the same thing over and over again, to like, actually, maybe this is really creative, because how hard is it to take something that you've been doing over and over again and refresh it to a point where people are actually still interested in it? You know what I mean? And so I just looked at it from so many different perspectives, basically. It's like bands you like, you know, they put out a bunch of albums that you love, and then all of a sudden, like, they go downhill and they fire important members. And next thing you know, they're like, you're like, God, I hate that band now. I used to love them, but they ruined everything I liked about them. You know what I mean? So sometimes it's cool when the band just kind of falls apart and you're like left with that exact catalog and those memories. And, you know, I think the story kind of played out well, and I learned a lot. And yeah, it was super fun. And I felt like it was like a whole way of like branching out as an artist. And like, for me, I love blowing glass, but spending 12 hours a day, 5-6 days a week in front of a torch gets old eventually. So to like be able to like mix up what I'm doing and like, you know, get involved in doing graphic design and thinking about imageries, even fuck around with doing some painting and stuff like that, and like, and just like try to like mix up where my mind is, but have that all be one united body of work. I mean, that's really appealing to me. You know what I mean? So and you know, also, again, it's just trying to like figure out how to survive as a creative, because honestly, it wasn't until the pandemic that I feel like I really took the apparel stuff seriously. And the reason I did was out of necessity. So in case people don't know the story, in 2020, March 2020, I was running a big studio here in Philly, and I was overrunning that big studio because it was just like a headache for me to like deal with, basically. Like imagine having a studio that costs like, you know, thousands of dollars a month, renting space to all these different folks. And at any minute, people can just move out. And then how you're responsible for covering. If no one moves in, you're responsible for all that. So it became something that like, now I'm not blowing as much glass. I'm just trying to run this studio. And after a while, I was like, you know, I didn't want to do that anymore, basically. I wanted to move to a smaller studio, but the studio was awesome. We had spent a bunch of time and money to build out what we had. Some other folks were interested in taking it over. So we were in the process of doing this transfer of like, hey, let's do a deal so you guys take over and we're going to move. I was going to move on. So that was March 2020. The pandemic went down. I moved into an empty warehouse without ventilation, without anything. Right. And so obviously the pandemic was like, no, you know, social distancing, da, 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 da. So I didn't get my studio running until 2021. So for most of 2020, I wasn't able to blow glass because again, you can't go to someone else's glass studio. So that's where I had this thing with the Assault Girl and making some merch and stuff like that. And I was like, well, let's just go harder on it and stuff like that. And people responded and, you know, and it was a lot of fun, actually. To be honest with you, it was good for me because now I'm back basically making a living full-time blowing glass and taking those few years off because what happened was in 2021, when I got my studio running back again, I was actually making a better living doing the merch than I was doing glass. And it wasn't as physically taxing. You know, I could go work 9 to 5, 5 days a week and go home and relax and have the weekend off. And I didn't have to like, I don't know, like glass is a really unforgiving medium. There's a million things that can go wrong with it. And sometimes it's interesting, like recently, for instance, I've been in a pretty good flow doing stuff. And I have a pretty complex process of my technique of how I produce glass these days. And sometimes shit's flowing and I'm like, every day I'm like, shit's coming out and I'm making nice sections. Then all of a sudden I'll have a day where everything goes wrong. All these little teeny things. And I'm like, this section's garbage. This one's garbage too. This one's garbage too. And you start to realize, fuck, got to remember all these little, there's so many easy little ways to like just mess something up and make it basically unsellable. Imagine having your paycheck depend on that. You know what I mean? Like, you know, there's so many ways. I mean, you know, I've done so many stupid things. Like, you know, I've made a piece and then taken it out of the kiln and walked up the stairs and just like tripped and dropped it. And there you go. It's just like, boom, there's your paycheck. You know what I mean? Like, or whatever. Like, I'm talking stupid shit. Not even like, forget even the like actual, or just, you know, just other dumb shit where you like make a piece and there's like a little scuff mark on it. And then you've got to like go back in on it and try to make it, you know, try to like make it first quality still. And like, there's so many ways glass can go wrong. So, you know, when I was in my 20s, like that wasn't as big of a deal because I had less responsibility and I wasn't thinking as much towards my future. But now I'm like, okay, like, you know, I just think differently now. It's just like, you know, my world is different. My responsibilities are different. So like the hustle's different or whatever.
With no glass now?
Yeah. I mean, I'm making a living full time. I have a new company with my business partner, Pyroscopic, called the Parking Lot Collective. And the basis of that company is taking what I learned from Slinger Apparel and applying it to other artists that we have a relationship with in the glass pipe scene. In other words, what I realized with is that, you know, I took what I was doing in glass and I like created other products like rugs or t-shirts or whatever. And, you know, a lot of artists do production lines or things like that. You know what I mean? Like you want to make like $5,000 rigs or whatever, but you might spend all, you know, again, like I'm saying earlier, you spend all week, all month, whatever on a piece, it can get compromised. So if you really want to make some consistent living on the side, you're going to make spoons or pendants or simpler pieces of some sort or some kind of gig. You're going to do something. You're going to teach, right? So something like selling t-shirts was like better than making spoons. You know what I mean? Like I had an apprentice for a while, Devedita, who I taught how to make like my, like, production line basically before I ever got into making. I was making some t-shirts on the side, but it wasn't anything I was making money at, so I didn't take it seriously. But my mentality was, you know, trying to basically one day I realized that in terms of making a living, making glass, that making really cool work and making a really good living were like a conflict of interest with each other. Because if you want to just think about making something awesome, you can't think about paying your bills. But if you don't think about paying your bill, you know, again, if I I could spend all week making one piece, and my whole paycheck and the whole week depends on that one piece. So, hey, if I can get to the finish line with that piece and find someone who's got the budget to spend on that expensive piece, great, right? But if I divide that week into like 30 pieces and 2 of them crack, I still got 28 pieces, right? Like, and all those pieces, I only need to get smaller amounts of money for. So it's way easier to find stores and other people who have that budget for that kind of work, right? So you realize again that it's easier to make these smaller, simpler pieces to make a living, but you're like, dude, I've been blowing glass for 20 years and I know how to do these complex things and I believe in myself and I know I can do it. So that's where you start to find yourself in a bad place as a glass blower, because now you've been blowing glass for a while and the honeymoon is worn off. You're like, the fun of the original part of learning to blow glass is done. And now you're hustling. And then the piece you spent all week on because you want to be a cool guy glass blower breaks and you don't know how you're going to pay your rent. And and that's the challenge right there. And figuring out that's where the real shit comes in. You know what I mean? The real like make or break as an artist and figuring out that kind of.
Normally during those moments, would you just go back in there and make something else, or?
I've gone through a lot of generations of the glass game. So again, when I started, there was no social media. There was no internet. Pipes didn't sell for more than $400. So in today's world, I see glass blowers being like, no one's watching my stories and blah, blah, blah. And to me, I'm the old guy that walked the tank on my back. So I'm like, whatever, dude. Like, to me, I don't have much sympathy for that. I got to be honest with you. Setting the glass is only part of the job, right? Unless you have someone that's dedicated to helping you sell it, but now they're gonna have to get a percentage, right? You got to learn to hustle. And so that's what I take it back to what I was saying in the beginning of this conversation in terms of back when I first, glass blowers were hustlers. That was part of it. Like, you didn't really get into it as like, la-di-da, I'm going to make stuff. Like, people got into it partly because they were like, I'm a hustler and I know how I'm going to hustle this. Like I'm saying, like, I started blowing glass and then 6 months later, I quit my job, right? And it wasn't because I was that good at blowing glass. It was because I was that good at hustling. Now, I also, back then was different. Like, there weren't a lot of glass blowers. Like, when I was blowing glass in 97 in Ithaca, I barely knew any other glass blowers. And I knew tons of college kids. And I knew tons of people who went to fish shows and tons of people who smoked weed. And I had tons of drug dealers, tons of growers. So it was like the market was just everywhere for me. I didn't have to even get on any internet, right? It was just all over the place. Like, before I blew glass, I sold glass, and Ezra and a couple other friends, Marcel and this dude and Pedro, were living in like Oregon. They would send me glass to Ithaca in like 95, 96. And I would throw like Tupperware parties basically at people's house. I'd go to like cool dudes, weed smokers' house, and they'd call all their friends. They all come over and I'd pull the gun case out and everyone would be like, how much, how much, how much? And I would just sell a case of glass again, because there was no store anywhere for any of these guys to get it. So if you had it, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. So then I've evolved with the scene as it's gone. You know what I mean? And there have been so many different iterations of the glass pipe scene and learning how to navigate it. And, I didn't go to a trade show for the first 10 years. Not that trade shows were even that big necessarily then, but like, So yeah, and then again, so like at some point in my career, actually the first trade show I went to in 2006, I went because I was making Degenerate Art, and I went more because I was trying to film and like investigate the scene more than I cared as a maker. But I did have a few pieces that I'd made that I brought with me, and I realized, why have I not been going to this thing? This is like, there's money to be made here. And the early trade show days were dope because the internet hadn't really come about and the internet had connected everybody yet. So in 2006, 2007, 2008, there were like 2 trade shows a year, the spring show and the summer show. And you'd go to those shows and these head shops would come with literally like a briefcase full of money or a checkbook. And they were walking around stocking up. They were like, dude, we don't have access to these guys. I would like come back with like a bunch of money. And so that was the new hustle. Like, instead of going to the lot, it was like, I'm going to hustle up for these trade shows, right? And I don't exactly know what happened, but if I'm going to guess, with the trade shows, eventually social media. And now, not only can individual consumers talk to the pipe makers, they don't have to go to the shops. I don't think that's totally it. I think beyond that, the shops could just talk to the pipe makers. And now, sure, maybe the shop's going to go to the trade show to do the check-in with you and shake your hand and see what you're up to and look at the stuff in person. But there's no urgency to purchase at the trade show, because I'm just going to see your posts and I'm going to send you a DM and I'm going to like Venmo you money. Like, I'm putting it back to perspective. We didn't have any of that shit when I first started. So in terms of me surviving anything, it's like, it's all like, I survived the hardest part of it, right? Like, weed was so hella illegal on so many levels. Like, we were so outlawed, you know, in it. Like even just posting shit online, like I was like, maybe I'm gonna get in trouble. You know what I mean? At some point or whatever. Who knows, you know? But yeah, it's been great.
Y'all ready to put it up there? Y'all ready? Come on.
I'm gonna take a big one.
Wanna try this?
Yeah, why not? Let's go. He's got a rig I made. I wouldn't mind hitting my homie's rig over there at some point. Do you remember what year I made this? I'm asking you. 17. I haven't made a rig since I have made a few rigs for my dome, but I haven't made one for sale since pre-pandemic. I'm working my way back up to it though. I am.
Anybody got an extra torch?
There's right here. Oh, you need an extra one? I'll be quick.
Well, send me a little bit about your documentary.
Well, the documentary was definitely a labor of love. I went to film school and I studied documentary film in school, and that had a huge influence on me, obviously. But for real, it like actually kind of gave me the confidence and a little bit of like direction into what to do, basically. And you know, I mean, the first thing I learned in film school was that all film is propaganda. And when I saw a documentary about graffiti and it made graffiti look really awesome as opposed to like this horrible, you know, vandalizing property, and it made it look like this glorious thing, I was like, okay, if a film can make graffiti, if people want to go out and write graffiti, I can make a film that make people want to, like, you know, instead of demonizing cannabis culture, it makes it beautiful, you know, makes it something people want to do, right? And I'll be honest with you, when I first started making the film, I made the film from 2006 to 2011. So I spent a good 5-6 years on it. And what actually motivated me at first was actually mental health. I was feeling really depressed. I was like about 10 years into blowing glass, and I was sick of it. I wasn't making very good money. I didn't feel like anyone was paying attention. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing? What's my future? And some of me was thought about making the film just so as a way of turning the chapter. I was thinking to myself, I think I want to quit blowing glass, but I've been doing it for 10 years. And at that time in my life, I was like, 10 years is such a long time. I've been doing this for so long. I was like, I can't just have nothing to show for it. So in a sense, making the film was an attempt to have something to say for what I've been doing. But then as I started to make the film and travel around and interview pipe makers, it kind of got my love for the scene back. Like just meeting people I hadn't met before, and like I honestly didn't really know about Snodgrass. I had met him like once before I ever interviewed him, but like casually at some big event. Like we didn't like bro down or anything like that. I didn't really know banjo that well, a whole bunch of people, and so like getting out there and getting into people's spaces and talking to them, and it just kind of revitalized things for me a lot. So yeah, I just became this mission basically, and that was a roller coaster of emotion because again, I spent 4 or 5 years on the film. So believe me that in the middle of that, there's lots of times I was like, this thing's never gonna happen. Like I don't know if I'm ever gonna really get this. But I gotta say, the first ever film showing I did was one of the greatest nights of my life. It was awesome. Yeah, it was kind of like, I don't know, it was at a trade show in New Jersey. I don't know if anyone was here or there or not. It was a crazy night. Put it this way, it was like a huge room full of people. We were starting to film, and everyone was screaming and yelling to the point where I was almost like, where you better watch a movie, and everyone shuts up, right? And you're quiet. And I spent hard work on this film, so at first I realized that people were going loud. And then I realized that they were loving it, that they were like super stoked, and the energy in the room was insane. And I was kind of like, I don't know, you know, I never felt that vibe through any glass piece I ever made. Yeah.
And so the first time that I ever sat down and watched the film from start to finish myself, when the end credits rolled, I just bawled in tears. I was crying so hard, and it was emotional. I didn't expect it at all. But that's when I knew. I was like, I think I did something, because I couldn't believe how I felt. And again, like I never made a glass piece that caused that kind of emotion in me. You know what I mean? Let alone anyone else. And so, yeah, you know, that was a crazy journey and a crazy experience. And like, that was a good example of making something because you just believe you need to do it. And there's no commercial aspect to it.
Yes.
You know, it probably cost about $100,000 to make that film at the end of the day. I had some sponsors. I did some fundraising and a bunch of money came out of my own pocket. I did end up getting on Netflix for 3 years. They gave me, I think, $5,000 a year. It was maybe not even. It was really a small amount. It was surprisingly small. That was a miracle in itself, honestly, because in today's world, we never get on Netflix. Netflix is very insular now and self-produced, and they're not just picking up independent documentaries like they were in 2012. And what I actually did is get lucky, too, because I got into South by Southwest Film Festival. And film festivals, in essence, are trade shows where you're selling product, selling content, right? Who's going to pick it up? And obviously, if you're at Sundance or you're at Tribeca, there's certain film festivals that have, you know, Cannes Film Festival has a crazy reputation. So if you're at that film festival, you're at the upper echelon. South by Southwest is a very prestigious film festival. I applied to like, I swear, 25 maybe film festivals. And each one of those costs money. It probably costs like $100 per application. So even that shit like costs a bunch of money, right? I got rejected by every festival except South by Southwest. I couldn't believe it. But it's like if I could have chosen one to get into, it would have been that. Actually, I think literally they chose like there were like 16 documentaries that or something like that. So of like 5,000 entries, like I got lucky in my opinion. Honestly, I went down to South by Southwest, had dinner with Richard Linklater, who directed Days Confused, and a couple other people. They had this crazy special, you know, they had some special dinners and events for all the filmmakers. So I got to be at these events with people that I shouldn't have been there with or whatever. But the crazy thing is all the independent films that I was with at South by Southwest, they all were on Netflix like the next 2 to 3 years. Every single one of them, basically. So that's right, you know, got as far. Yeah, it worked out actually. So I actually got picked up by an independent film distributor out of New York City that distributed Banksy's film and a bunch of other big independent type films, and they got my Netflix deal and stuff like that. Like you can't get that shit on your own, really. And again, even now, I probably wouldn't be able to get that kind of thing, even with the help of an independent company. It'd be very, very difficult. But yeah, I mean that's lucky because you know. At that time, in terms of like how Americans are digesting content, Netflix was just blowing up. It just the streaming service. They went from there, like you know, remember you got DVD in the mail and you sent it back, and then the streaming thing started to pop off, and so that's at the like streaming is starting to become the way everyone is digesting it. But it wasn't as controlled as it probably is now, right? So it still had this. There's a little bit of a more opening for like independents to get. You know, on the front. I remember I was even on the top 10 documentaries on iTunes when I first dropped it on iTunes, just for a little bit. Like, it was actually pretty cool. So that really, you know, got the message out there or whatever. And, yeah, you know, in my opinion, that's going to be the most important thing I kind of do. I'm going to try to constantly be creative in my career. Maybe I'll make another movie of some sort. Who knows? You know what I mean? But like, in some senses, I'm like, I kind of feel like I was meant to be a part of the scene, partly to make that movie. Whatever, you know, either have my experience to translate it into that or whatever. And I honestly highly encourage other people to make film about it because I'm just one person who has one perspective about the scene. There's tons of pipe makers and glass makers, and they all have a different relationship with the medium, and all those relationships are completely valid, right? So they all need a voice. They all need someone to tell their story and their perspective. You know, that's just my perspective, how I saw it, how I lived it, or whatever. But yeah, you know, definitely, film is a powerful medium that really, you know, well, you know, it's one of those things that people don't have a lot of attention span for digesting a conversation. Even me, like I space out in a conversation sometimes. I'm like, fuck, I forgot what was that guy saying to me. You know what I mean? But when it comes to film, when it comes to film, you just lock in. You know, you go into any room where there's a television on, people are like, they can't stop looking. You almost have to be like, yo, stop looking at TV. We're talking. You have to turn the TV off, right? So it's a great, if you want to like put information in someone's brain, make a commercial, make a television show, make a film, and you get someone to watch it, they can digest a bunch of information in a way that's even more powerful than you talking because you've got, you know, imagery, sound, music, all these things and editing and juxtaposition to like really like, you know, and that's what we learned in film school is how powerful of a communication medium it was, you know what I mean? And again, I saw like subcultures like skateboard and graffiti, tattoo art. And I'm like, what's propelling these cultures forward? And it was basically documentation, books and movies and things like that. You know, it's funny how people don't think something is legit until they see a newspaper article about it. Then they see see it on TV, and then they see a book about it, and all those things start to, oh, that's a real thing now. You know what I mean? Like, it's sort of something people are just talking about, but once it's like documented, it's like the deal is sealed in some kind of situation. You can digest it in some sort of way. It's like now that's a thing. It's like now it's like it exists as opposed to like before. You know, it's funny because like I used to talk to my parents about cannabis culture all the time. I'd be like, you know, we're going to legalize weed one day and it's bullshit. It's illegal and da 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 da. And there's a movement to do that. I remember my parents used to be like, we don't even know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And my parents were really into the New York Times. And then one day, the New York Times came out with an article about the hemp movement. My mom cut it out, sent it to me. She's like, you were right. There is a hemp movement. And that's when it clicked in me. I was like, oh, that's the power of a newspaper article. I could talk to my mom blue in the face about what's going on. Her own son, was like, that's nice, honey. I don't really believe you, but like, whatever. All of a sudden, the New York Times writes it in an article and publishes it. My mom's like, this is a real thing. The hemp movement is now real. It is in the New York Times. You know what I mean? So you realize the psychology of that kind of stuff. Like, it's all psychological. Like, so you're like, okay, like, if I want people to believe this is real, let's make a movie. Let's make some books. Like, look, when you put it that, people are like, this is a thing. Like, there it is. I can point you at it, and you can digest it. It puts it all together because, like that's what Degenerate Art does to some degree or whatever. It's like you've seen a pipe and you smoked out of one, then you see the movie and it puts all of it together, and you're like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, and again, like I saw this movie Star Wars, and after Star Wars, it's a documentary made in 1982 about the gold. It's my favorite documentary ever, so I highly recommend watching it. It was a huge inspiration to me make Degenerate Art. I literally took notes on it. But the movie, it was at the Sundance Film Festival in 82. It was on PBS in the 80s. And actually, it's crazy because tons of artists that I'm a fans of, I've watched random different interviews with these random different guys. Like, if anyone's ever read, like, Juxtaposed magazine, ever checked out all those articles, those, like, Juxtaposed magazine type artists or whatever, I've watched different interviews with those kind of guys, like Sam Flores, Bigfoot, whoever. And every other one of them was like, yeah, I saw this movie Star Wars on PBS. And that's how it was like the opening, the door to them, the gateway drug to doing art. You know, seeing this thing about graffiti, it made them want to go write graffiti. And when I saw Star Wars, it did the same thing. I really like graffiti. But when I saw Star Wars, when the movie ended, I wanted to go out and write graffiti. I was like, this is the sickest shit ever. And I was like, I want to make that for glass pipes. You know what I mean? Like, I want to make something that at the end of it, you're like, yeah, let's do that. You know what I mean? Like, let's celebrate that or whatever.
That's awesome.
Thank you for coming on. Cool, man. I can talk forever.
Where can people find some of your work at?
On Instagram, marble.slinger. Basically, I make a purchase from there. Yeah, you can send me a DM or whatever. I love to chat with people or, yeah.
Thank you, Gammy.
Don't be there, bunkie.